Okay, so headed over to Canvas. We just watched the video. This is what we're going to recreate in Tableau. But to do that, we need to connect to multiple data sources. So let's go ahead and download the data that we need by clicking on the zip file here and downloading that guy. Once that downloads and you can open that up, you should have 4 different CSV files. So we need to pull these into Tableau. So let's start a new workbook in Tableau. And we are going to connect to the dataset first. So text file, and I will go to where I have it saved. And the first one we're going to start with is income per person. So when this pulls up, this has the income for each country throughout each year. But if we take a look at the data setup, it is a little bit weird. And it turns out that the first row is actually needs to be the column names. So to do that in Excel, to kind of bring it up one row in Tableau, excuse me, really easy. We just need to click over here and then field names are in first row. There we go. Now we have geo is the country name. So let's go ahead and rename that. You can double click that, rename that to country. And then if we take a look at what we have here, we have a column for each individual year. So for 1800, the income for these countries is listed down the columns, down for each row. We actually need to rotate, in other words, pivot this data. So we want to have an indicator variable for the year, and then a column for the value of the income. To do that with Tableau, it's super easy. All we need to do is click the first column here, and you're going to hold Shift down and scroll all the way to the right. So we're just going to be selecting all of the columns. So make sure you have Shift held down. And then you can click on the very last column. It should highlight all of them. Then we want to right click, pivot, and there we go. Now we have a column that we can rename as year. And we have a column that we can rename as income per person. And this is going to be the first data set that we have. So next up is to load in the other data sets. So we are going to go data, new data source, and this is a text file. CSV is a text file. So next we will bring in the life expectancy. So it popped up right away. So we need to do the same process. We need to bring the first row up to the column names and then pivot. One quick way to do this is with the data interpreter. If I just click this checkbox, that is going to kind of quickly recognize that the first row is actually the field names, but we do still have to pivot this manually. So let's go ahead and repeat the process. So click the first column for the year, rotate all the way over to the 2018, hold Shift down, highlight all of them, right click, pivot. And again, we can rename this to country. We need these to have the same name. These are going to be the mapping fields. So we're eventually going to connect the life expectancy to the income data that we just had. So we need to have the same exact field names for the country and the year. Those are the two ones that match up. And the information that we're bringing in here is life expectancy. Okay, so 2 more times we need to bring in data sources. So data, new data source. Again, text file. Now we'll bring in the population data. And repeat same process. So I'm going to check the data interpreter. That brings the field names up from the first row. Let's rename this to country. And then we can pivot one last time. We don't need to do this on the last data set. Rename to year and rename to population. Okay, so now we have 3 of our 4 data sets bring in. And if I take a look here, right, I can click through each of these different tables and we have the data sets lined up. So the last one, data, new data source. Now we want to bring in the region information. So which area of the world is each country in? So here, name corresponds to country. So again, we want them to all match up. So let's go ahead and rename that. We don't need all of these columns. We can keep the variables that correspond to the country abbreviation. We'll call it country ID. And we also want to keep a region, but that is the only ones that we need. So we can highlight these ones in between that we don't need, and we can hide those. So if I right click and then hide, we can also hide everything after region. So if I click subregion, shift down to region code, hide those, and hide these remaining ones as well. These are the only 3 that we need from this data set. Okay, so now that we have all of the data pivoted and rearranged as we needed, let's go ahead and start working on the visual.